Hi, everybody. Welcome to In Deep with Shiro and Mehreen, sponsored by Guided Soul-ution. This is part two of our talking points on toxic positivity. And you timely brought up the topic or the term shadow work. So we talked about, that we are light. And as long as we're made of light, that we have shade or shadow. And that this shadow part of us is sort of the culprit of negativity. We think that that's where all the problems are, and so forth. And we kind of touched on the whole topic of embracing that negativity, understanding that even as we encounter negativity outside of us, that it is a response to something that is vibrating within us. And that as we begin to give it love, as we begin to accept or embrace both polarity as one equal value, that we do not need to treat it or see it as a negative. Because if you think about it, even darkness is often regarded as something negative. But yet, when we think about nighttime versus daytime, we don't think of it as polarity of positive or negative. It's just a contrast of one day, right?
hmm
God, you're quiet.
Oh,
Is
no,
it
I was
is it
just
because we had
thinking.
the pizza? Is that what happened?
It was so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Pizza pirate. Yeah, that was a cool pizza.
not sponsored by them though,
Yeah, no,
sadly, not
that's
yet.
true.
Yeah, I mean, equating it to the nighttime is really beautiful. I think when people think of negativity or the darkness, it's scary because why? Because it's the unknown, right? It's
Right.
like if I dig into my feelings, what am I going to figure out,
Exactly.
Because there's going to be some discomfort there because that's the
Yeah.
catalyst for growth. So when you speak,
Again.
yeah, to it of a nighttime, it's like I love the
Yeah.
nighttime. I love going out to the garden and being able to see the stars, and
Yes.
it's a different perspective of the same thing. So why is that
Absolutely.
not valuable?
Exactly. And thank you. And I love that you mentioned the word uncertainty, right? Because oftentimes it is the unknown, right? Because what we fear in all aspects of fear is not really the thing that we are fearing in and of itself, but it is the element of the unknown is what we mostly feel the fear toward.
Why do you think that is? We're all so bored all of the time. Like you would think we would gravitate towards the new and the unfamiliar, but
Yeah, that's a good point and good question. I think that, like, for example, I do think about for that moment I just pictured ocean at night.
mhm.
Why would I would be more afraid to swim in the ocean at night, right? Um, the or the to perceive the infinite depths of the ocean and how dark it becomes when you're in that the deepest part of the ocean area. Um, First, I think the thing that triggers the fear from darkness is because darkness in and of itself already says absence of light. And absence of light already um, gives us a sense of loneliness,
Mhm.
bareness, sense of vulnerability.
Mhm.
Um, because light represents knowledge, or represents pathways, and so
Mhm.
forth. So, yeah, the uncertainty in many ways creates the sense of fear.
Do you think there's a correlation to primitive times where the nighttime would bring a new set of predators that you couldn't see or necessarily fight against?
Well,
Or
that's another thing. You're right.
Mhm.
It's true that any kind of predatorial, conniving, or any kind of criminal activity for that matter,
Mhm.
anything that you don't want to be found or to be hidden, is of course more active in the dark
Mhm.
or nighttime. Yes.
Yeah, 'cause I think of the sort of biological conditioning, as we evolve. But now, we don't have to worry about this saber-toothed tiger attacking us in our sleep. Like we have doors that lock and it's not a big deal. But for some reason, we haven't really evolved past that fear of the nighttime brings this set of unseen variables,
Yeah.
right? We everything in our life is so controlled at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And really the nighttime is like, as a creative, that's my time to tap into those energies. And
Right.
it's quiet. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I love people. I'm very extroverted, but during the daytime it's hard to plug into my work because there's so much going on.
Mm-hmm.
Neighbors are doing their thing. I want to go mingle with everybody. I got to go run errands. And that nighttime, that quiet time, that period of just solitude
Mm-hmm.
is so useful. I mean,
Right.
even as an intuitive and somebody who's, drawing in more downloads and energetic work, that's when that happens for me
Right.
because I'm finally just still enough for it to occur.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all keep ourselves so busy that
Yeah.
we're trying to stay in perma daytime constantly. I mean, even with our lights, like when are we actually in darkness?
Yeah.
Most people have the lights on, even when it's dark outside.
Mm-hmm.
They have their TV on, they're looking at their phone
Mm-hmm.
until it's time to go to bed. And it's like, all right, let me just shut the phone off and turn over and fall
Right.
asleep. And it's not natural, really.
Right. Yes. It's because part of us, even falling asleep sometimes,
Mm.
is a sensation of sort of dying. Right. So there's a sort of a resistance to sleeping or resistance to falling asleep, or because we want to see as much of the world as possible before we fall asleep and momentarily
That's
die.
discounting the worlds you can explore once you're asleep, though. I'm like, I love falling
Yeah,
asleep.
no, I
I
understand.
love the feeling of dying. I don't know.
But okay, so if we, that is definitely sort of, focusing on the night, day and night,
Hmm.
right? But when
Hmm.
we start talking about shadow, when we start talking about aspects of us, our shadow, what is in our shadow, that's when there is a lot of stigma. So we talked about that, that with this law of equal polarity, that if you're capable of loving, then you must be equally capable of um, destructive uh, destruction or violation, harm, anything opposite of what love would represent,
And
for
do you
example.
think that feeling of power on both ends of the spectrum is scary for some people because it comes with a sense of responsibility?
Absolutely, of course.
Mhm.
I think that's why sometimes we even fear our own potential success. We fear our own strength and power as well. You know, energy is energy, right? Energy in and of itself is neither positive or negative. It's how we choose to channel that energy where that determines that. And that's where um, sovereignty creates that sense of conscious choice to channel our energy toward, for example, someone who is temperamental or agitated or irritable is because there's an energy that is needing to be channeled and they're unable to channel it in their positive polarity so that it becomes sort of a negative expression because it becomes sort of a temperamental,
Mhm.
dense, right? It becomes more of harmful or self-critical or whatever it may be. But the overall temperament being sort of the representation of negative versus positive will be passion. So someone who is temperamental can be also passionate as well. So in that sense, the dynamics are all equal in that sense, right? If you can be a very dynamically passionate person, then that means that if you're in the state of negative, then you can be very temperamental or short fused.
Do you think there's an element of transmutation that's needed for somebody who's very passionate, for example, and if they've had an experience where they are feeling these negative feelings,
Mm-hmm.
that's redundant, these negative
Mm-hmm.
emotions, can they transmute it into a way that is a passionate release versus just wallowing in the negativity and the outbursts of it? Or is that bypassing?
So that's the thing is that's exactly what this part two of this segment is really getting into, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is shadow and what is shadow work? And that's exactly what you're sort of segueing into right now. Um, so first of all, let's just define what we're talking about in terms of shadow, in regards to our introspect, right? Our something that we when we look within us. So the way I kind of defined shadow in and of itself is kind of aspects of us that are unacknowledged, unaware, and unaccepted. Now, so in the spiritual community, there is a process where it is widely known, where we go through that process of what sometimes is called the dark night of the soul, where we go through a phase or even a season, sometimes a very long season.
It's not just a night, you guys.
So yeah, sometimes it's a night, or sometimes it's a season, sometimes, but in
A
other words, a
year.
sense of sounds very personal, but yes,
More on
absolutely.
that later.
But it's a phase that we go through where we are sort of being guided or to focus on the shade side of our being. And so the term shadow work sort of kind of is the most widely known part of that. And the shadow work is defined by many in different ways. And the way I kind of iterated was this, and that is an introspective process that acknowledges, addresses, and accepts the aspects of us that have yet to be integrated. Now, notice I didn't say healed.
Why is that?
So maybe. Okay. So
Shadow work can be fun. So look at us. We're laughing.
exactly.
It's great.
Because, and that's a whole nother topic, a sort of sort of a Pandora's box, really, kind of. But yeah, the word healing is something that I'll definitely dive into in another episode of our In Deep. But uh, just really just to quickly go over that is that because healing suggests malfunction. Healing suggests that there's something wrong that we need to recover from. And shadow work has nothing to do with healing.
There's something broken about it.
Yeah, it's not really a wound. It is a narrative that definitely feels like a wound.
Yeah.
You are, of course, welcome to share any episodes that may give us a sense of more expansion to that particular topic, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, where do I'm glad you pointed out wounds as a term that we should maybe think about moving away from. But narratives, it's funny you say that because my beautiful partner has supported me through this dark year of the soul, really. And narratives was a big thing that I was just enacting in my life without even realizing it,
Right.
Until I had somebody with that sort of outside perspective who was still empathetic, but could give me a different view of it. And, so many narratives from, just how I approached relationships, my sort of just journey with self-love and acceptance, and realizing that that's the big one that's at the crux of most of all of them. My relationship with money and living in a sort of scarcity and fear mindset with that, and exhausting myself to have this sense of security. But all it was really doing was depleting me and taking me away from things that I wanted to do. And I had these narratives, that I was, I'm going to be homeless if I don't work 70 hours a week, or I'm going to be unlovable if I'm not constantly like people pleasing, or, all of these things we tell ourselves to have some control.
Yes.
But really, it's these wounds or narratives weren't serving me anymore, and they were actually keeping me from what I wanted. They were keeping me away from the work that I found valuable, because I was first equating, a sort of monetary value to things, and now, joy is a currency.
Absolutely.
And
you coined that one beautifully.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a lesson,
Yes.
daily. And even with self-love and realizing that I was not in balance, I would give so much love to people, but the sort of internal dialogue that I had with myself was one of self-loathing and extreme negativity. And, all of the, when you're a kid, you're afraid of all the things that go bump in the night, right? And like as I evolved and got older and into adulthood, those things that were in the closet kind of just started to reside in my head.
Mm.
And, things like body image and I was called obnoxious once as a kid, and like that stuck out to me so bad that
Mhm.
I've just believed that I was obnoxious my whole life, and that would really hold me back from participating in things because I didn't want to be seen as annoying
Mhm.
or as a nuisance or as a
Mhm.
pest. And, these narratives were holding me back.
Yeah.
And, they're not bad.
Mhm.
They're just not what I want anymore.
Right.
So it's that conscious decision to say, you know what, like, I'd like to love myself now.
Mhm.
So let's try that on for size. Or I'd like to work with people who make me happy
Mhm.
instead of, give me this false sense of security that doesn't really exist. Um, or that I'd like to, respect myself more the way that I respect others that I love.
Yeah.
And it's really just a matter of, in my case, they were pointed out to me,
Mhm.
through these external perspectives, but it's a matter of shining some light on it,
Mhm.
and spreading some love into it
Yeah.
and integrating it and moving
Yes.
on.
There you go.
I'd like to unpack some bigger monsters now at this point.
Wow.
I'm bored.
Powerful.
That sounds dangerous, though.
I
Careful what you
love
wish for.
I love how bored always pops up there.
I'm
Yeah,
extremely
'cause
bored all of the
in
time.
in the end, yes, you're right. But you beautifully captured and really summarized what shadow work is all about. Um, a lot of us, even when we go through our sense of awakening and ascension, that we like to think that life becomes more of a linear upward movement, right? But yet, in the end, it's about ebb and flow. We're like the tide. It needs to come in and then it needs to pull back. And the pull
Mm-hmm.
back is the thing that creates the momentum for bigger waves.
Mm-hmm.
We need to dip before the upward movement. There's always, even in our physical body, the physics says that we need to duck down before we jump upward. And
Mm-hmm.
the distance of the ducking is shorter than the upward movement that we can create. And so when we accurately describe what ascension of our consciousness really is, it's more of on a two-dimensional level, it's a more of a zigzag,
Mm-hmm.
like a roller coaster ride. And if we talk about it in a more three-dimensional sense, then it's a spiral.
Mm-hmm.
And so the process of going from the light to shadow, day to night, really even nature reflects the inner workings of our spiritual journey because the universe is within us and the universe is reflection of what's within us.
As
And
above,
so
so below, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, shadow work is not something about righting wrongs either. It's not about improving on things. It's about really giving attention to the areas that had been sort of neglected or haven't been discovered or recognized, like we were saying. So it's unacknowledged and unaware and unaccepted. Unaccepted is the part where it hurts the most because we're resistant to things like you were saying. Like, I'm not supposed to be this way. If I'm like this, I'm considered obnoxious, and therefore it creates a sense of lack of acceptance, and therefore it's bad. And so you held yourself back, and the suppression starts to cause discord, and the energy still has to
Mm-hmm.
go somewhere, and so it starts to create this unnatural flow of different energy leaking from different cracks, right?
Sounds horrible. It sounds like spiritual leaky gut syndrome. But it's true. I mean, the things that I thought I buried so well,
Mm-hmm.
they do fester,
Yeah,
and the energy has to be released somehow.
yeah.
So, I'm consciously trying to nip that in the bud as it
Mm-hmm.
arises,
Yeah.
but it's like, oh God, I've got 30 years of a backlog.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit of a purge, but
Absolutely.
it's really cathartic,
Mm-hmm.
and it really opens up so much more room for new beliefs
Mm-hmm.
and new practices and systems of thought that I'm trying to integrate into
Yes.
just who I am and how I live my life. And it's freeing,
Mm-hmm.
It's just I didn't realize how much space that was taking up.
Yeah.
It's really sad,
Yeah.
because you don't really realize it. I mean, you feel the heaviness of all of it is that, you know, that you're trying to integrate and shed love and light on, but until it's gone, you know, you're just like, oh man, it's like the chiropractor. I go pretty much every week.
Mm-hmm.
And if I skip a week or two, it's like, oh, I don't feel that bad, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because the body will adjust to it subtly. And whether it's a physical body or energetic,
Mm-hmm.
you know, these allowances will be made. But then, like 3 weeks later, you're kind of walking funny and, you know, everything kind of hurts now. Now you have
Right.
a headache because God knows what.
Right.
And then you go and you get an adjustment and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, yeah, that's what normal feels like.
Yeah.
This is what a point of balance feels like, where I'm
Mm-hmm.
not, you know, in the sort of excessive euphoric,
Mm-hmm.
obsessive compulsive sort of
Mm-hmm.
energy, or I'm not down, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in the depths of self-loathing and wanting to
Yes.
just kill myself.
Yeah.
You know, it feels really nice to just
Yes.
be well adjusted.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely trying to integrate more of that
Yeah.
these days.
Because, you know, and you, again, something else that you also mentioned that was also very powerful point here is that you said joy is your currency, you know. Um, so what creates this shadow within us oftentimes are just programs that we've accepted over the lifetimes and throughout our uh, youth and
Mm-hmm.
childhood and so forth. Some things are definitely carried over, and some things are, again, perpetuated or amplified as we
Mm-hmm.
go. You know, for example, like struggle with money, for example. You know, before we, you know, without getting into the hidden agenda of deprivation in a more greater sense that
Mm-hmm.
that power of control would like for us to experience, just taking on a personal level of journey. For example, you know, I often notice in my sessions that old souls often, you know, when I perceive a soul is evolved or old, we say old soul, but evolved souls often do have unique set of imbalances, right? Unique set of narratives, such as struggle with money, um, because old souls often have already lived lifetimes where they were already enlightened, lived a spiritual life, or dedicated their life to spiritual service, or in some way or another wanted to be of value to people. And what happens is that they create a vows of poverty in other lifetimes, and that sort of a vow continues and gets carried over because there are times, and even in this lifetime, there are many that still believe that to be spiritual, we must not have a material abundance or attached to materialism, that it hinders our spiritual journey.
To me, that's so contradictory, though, because we're humans living a very 3D existence.
Well,
And, you know,
yes.
I mean, I remember studying like Eastern religions when I was younger, and, you know, the just vowing off from all of the material goods and just, you know, transcending it. But I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I love my stuff, you know? I'm not like betrothed to it.
Yeah.
You know, I can walk away from it one day if I need to, but
Mm-hmm.
like things do make me happy because they carry energy and,
Absolutely.
um, yeah, I mean, I wanted to throw that in there because I think for a lot of people who are not the conventional spiritual types, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the Zen, calm, everything's all beautiful and white and serene, you know. I like a little bit of chaotic clutter, and
Absolutely.
that's totally fine.
Yeah. The imbalance isn't because of the
Mm,
materialism or the abundance that we have. And from first and foremost, when we go back to the term that I used in the part one section of our talking point, the state of affluence
mhm.
is immediately connected to abundance, prosperity. So to have affluence in a sense that creates the outcome of material abundance, it is very spiritual. And it is a reflection of a very healthy state of being. So, why was there that kind of paradigm created? Well, because they have not clearly differentiated the difference between having material abundance or manifesting material abundance versus attachment to material abundance or dependence on material abundance. And so that's where lack of information, or again, any kind of loyal alliance or alignment to that type of dogma is what created that type of vows and poverty and so forth. But again, we look at that and we go, okay, I struggle with money, so therefore there's something wrong. Or some people often say, I need to heal my relationship with money. And again, it's not a malfunction. You shine the light into that shade, because it's a shade as long as it creates or perpetuates that dense experience, something that's contrary to our highest vibratory state, which is like joy and love and so forth, right? So when we experience that struggle because we aren't able to access things with money that we can, it is undoing or shedding light, right? Like you just said, it's shedding light into that paradigm and going, oh, wow, I am giving myself the narrative, right? That somehow, because like musicians, I mean, I'm the epitome of that. As long as I'm a musician, there's a part of me, unless I have greatly broken through to a great level of success, like a rock stardom, that I am meant to starve. I am meant to be poor. Starving musician.
It's
Starving,
romanticized.
yeah, starving artist. It's romanticized, exactly. And we don't recognize that it is a paradigm or a program that perpetuates that response back to our life.
I think at the root of that, there's a systemic understanding that needs to happen of you are creating your own reality,
Yes.
and part of me working through the financial stuff was, fuck it, I didn't come here to be broke. Like, I have so much to do. Enough with that. Like,
Yeah.
let's move on.
Yes, exactly.
So it's the crux of it for me is just understanding and accepting, because I know it, but to know and to accept for me are slightly different.
You're right.
I can intellectualize, all day long, but it's like at the core, has it permeated?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, once and I'm still getting there.
Mm-hmm.
I can still be very 3D and very human, like the rest of us. But it's, understanding that we really do create our own reality, and these narratives that we tell ourselves, right? I mean, do you know what NLP is? Like neuro-linguistic programming. It's the things you say. Your body doesn't understand, or the spirit doesn't understand hyperbole or sarcasm. So you're saying, oh my God, I'm dead. Like, that was so funny. There is that moment of like your body is like, wait, what did you just say? Because the ego's job is to, execute your will.
Yes.
And so when we have these narratives that we're saying to ourselves, even on the inside, it's powerful.
It
our
is.
thoughts, our intentions, they literally shape everything.
Yes.
So let's at least say them consciously.
Yeah, because I do remember that even as I reflect on those times where I was that starving musician, that one of the primary narrative I was repeating within myself was, I can't get a break. I can never get a break. I'm not the lucky type. Or I don't have what it takes, right? So these are definitely things that sometimes I'm thinking that I'm telling myself, perhaps to keep myself humble, or because I'm afraid that my ego is going to blow up or whatever. But nonetheless, that kind of artificial, forced humility also creates and perpetuates a state of scarcity as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
I really don't like that word too. Just, I don't know. I think there's some, maybe there's some shadow work that needs to happen with humility and being humble. But I think coming from my background of, Middle Eastern and South Asian, there's the, be seen and not, heard, and be humble and be meek. And it's like, but wait, no, I'm so talented and I have so much to share.
Yeah.
And it's like,
yeah,
the things we tell ourselves to just dim our own light.
Yes, that's definitely part of even Asian culture. Japanese culture has a saying, "Deru kugi wa utareru," which means that if a nail sticks out, we'll be hammered. So there's.
So we love getting hammered, right?
Party
What's so
on,
wrong with
dude!
that?
Party on. No, because there is a misunderstanding that humility equates to hammering yourself lower than the other, lowering yourself from others, to present this view of humility, but it's not. It's just a appearance of humility, but it's false humility. A true sense of humility is when you do step into your greatness, that you perceive an infinite ceiling of greatness above you yet. And that is when you really recognize that you're still a grain of sand, in the infinite state of beautiful beach. So even that is, again, a narrative that we're, and it's repeated and imprinted into our DNA and reproduced, right, into generations after generations of that program. So ancestral karma is something that is literally imprinted with our genetics that causes us this certain inclination. And so when a soul chooses to incarnate through that type of genetic pattern, when we choose our parents and the genetic codes that it carries, we are very aware of every minute detail of the stories, the ancestral stories that these genetic codes carry. And the reason why we choose them is because we have an agenda of our own that matches that particular inclination. And as we volunteer ourselves to be housed in that type of biological model, it creates that inclination again, or recreates the similar kind of inclination, and thus another scenario or episode of it, and we give ourselves another opportunity to choose what to do about it. So shadow work is a very powerful thing because it's identifying that emotion or that aspect of us. And the thing about this that I really think is really important to remember is that it's not the emotions or the symptom of that shadow that we experience that matters in a sense of materializing. It is what we choose to respond to or to act on that emotion that really materializes or matters. So the moment we feel something is not a problem or it's not an issue. It is an alarm. It is an inner navigational system giving us and bringing it back up to our conscious awareness. Oh, wow, that experience makes me feel this way, and therefore there's something in me that is triggered by this particular type of person or experience.
The chance to kind of take inventory, right, of
Right.
all of these things that are taking up the space.
Or in your case, what you said, you notice that there's a perpetual pattern within yourself that you momentarily detach and you become observant of it. And you go, wow, why am I struggling with money? And why do I feel this way?
I mean, and the second you change your mindset, it all changes,
Yes.
And that's the beautiful thing. I mean, in any regard, you're so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another quote, and I love my quotes, that, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And so when I think of these instances, whether it's in the workplace or with family and where something happens and you just feel like shit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy to just say, oh my God, this happened and how am I going to respond?
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfair and yada, yada. But, not giving it that power is really what's important. And treating it as an experience to learn from.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like you're pulled out of your life for a moment and you're like, okay, these are all the players. This is what's going on. How do you want to proceed? And it's almost detaching from it is kind of the way to go about it, my opinion. So,
and that is the introspective process, right? So when we talk about shadow work, that's exactly what it is. It's just a process where we are able to just first and foremost invite that feeling into our conscious awareness. Because sovereignty isn't about not feeling those things. It's not about not having those aspects of us. Sovereignty is that we are aware and are consciously choosing which side of us to project at any given moment. And so in that sense, shadow work is a very powerful process, and a process that certainly is vital to the ascension process. So when, oftentimes in my line of work, I have a lot of clients that come in and they become enlightened, though they become sort of awakened to that excitement of understanding those that there's hope, there's light, there's that we are creators of our reality. But as soon as the storm comes, right? As soon as the shadow begins to surface, that's when we really know if that person is on the path or the trajectory of what we kind of used as positivity. Really, that's now in this stage of our conversation is sort of now becoming more ambiguous, but the more sense of ascension. So the true state of ascension of consciousness is when we are willingly engaging in that shadow work. And that's really a very oftentimes the part that is neglected, avoided, or sometimes even ignored. And that's
Or
where
glamorized too. I see it being something trendy that like Goop talks about, but no one really gets into it, and
yeah,
I mean, you're
that's true.
starting to see some individuals say that, it's not for the faint of heart, but like beyond that, like it's brutal. Like you
Yeah.
will be on the floor in a puddle of tears and snot, and just utterly devastated because the things you're pulling up are so deeply ingrained. And if it's not in you, it's the ancestral,
Yes.
inheritance
Yeah,
of
you're right.
God knows what. And it's definitely a bold undertaking, but when you're dissolved into a puddle of tears, like that was already inside of you,
Yeah.
and it was something that was so hidden and buried, and to bring light to it is really, it's not easy, but God, it's so worth it,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
can't really speak to it, you can't describe it, but once you go down that road, like I don't know if there's no turning back. I mean, I'm sure you can do whatever you'd like, but I don't think you'll want to turn back
Yeah.
because you'll see just how rewarding it is.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. You know, it's it's really where the term whole, being whole comes from. Otherwise, we are we are sort of in a state of fragmented state, right? In other words, um, that's where even the term soul retrieval really comes from. Is that if it's something that's been unresolved or unaddressed from another lifetime, then those are fragments of our souls that still are remaining or lying stagnant in that particular timeline. And that part of what soul retrieval, which is a shamanic sort of a process that they do, is to really basically retrieve all of those aspects of us. So again, shadow work comes in various terms. It's addressed in various different ways and methods. So there's no one way of doing it, and I think that the most important aspect, a thing or essence, is our willingness to address that or to dive into that.
It's funny you mentioned soul retrieval.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I dabbled with, a few years ago, and it actually was just a really negative experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In the sense of the person I was doing it with just clearly kind of learning the ropes as well.
Mm-hmm.
But in all of the literature that you read about soul retrieval, no one actually talks about the shadow work aspect of it. It's usually the actual retrieval
Mm-hmm.
itself and the methodology of that, because it can be so different for each person.
Right.
But then what?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, last summer I went through my own journey of that with your help, and
Mm-hmm.
that was an interesting experience
Mm-hmm.
for a month. But then after that, it's like there's still so much integration that needs to happen. And
Yeah.
okay, now you've got this piece of you back, but it's like when people, I can equate it to adopting like an animal from a shelter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who's had a pretty checkered past and there's been some abuse and you don't really know what because you can't, read your dog's mind yet. But, you can tell that there's some sort of PTSD or trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, soul retrieval is akin to that adoption, right?
Mm.
But like once you adopt that dog, like that's not it. Like just because you're home and it has a new fuzzy bed and all the dog toys, like that's just the start of the journey.
Yeah.
You know, that trust and that rehabilitation needs to
Yeah.
happen. And for me, that shadow work really is like soul rehab. And
Mm.
it's not
I
fun,
like
and you're
that.
purging, and you're
Yeah.
going to be crying in a corner, asking for another fix of the stuff that makes you feel good temporarily,
Yeah.
but doesn't help you overall.
Right.
And I mean, shadow work and soul retrieval really do need to be hand in
Yeah, they're
hand, in my
synonymous, I
opinion.
think.
Hmm.
We often get caught up in the sort of the dogma of every different method or teaching, and we get to realize that they're all pretty much saying the
The
same
core
thing with
truths.
different terminology. When I was a Christian, it was just all about, oh, the Holy Spirit put it on my heart to tell you this or whatever, and really, the Holy Spirit is your higher self, and that it's what is the difference between spirit or energy or soul to consciousness.
I think that speaks to the disconnect that everyone feels. You know, I mean, a lot of us know that we're all one aspect of source,
Mm-hmm.
but knowing it and feeling it and being it is one thing,
Yeah,
right?
you're
You know,
right.
I mean, just that divisiveness of, you are God. God
Mm-hmm.
told you to do something, but God isn't this outside source who's, got like a hotline to you. Like you're a part of that and
Yeah,
vice versa. And
right.
it's way more just
Yeah,
synonymous.
that is definitely something that I can't help but to keep going back to my own personal experience, because I was such very passionately devoted to that theology of the dogmatic aspect of Christianity. I still regard Jesus Christ as one of most powerful ascended masters, but Jesus Christ didn't come here to be worshipped. He was literally someone that came and said, "Hey, this is who you are." As he said is in his own words, that you shall do the things that I've done and more. And even in the religion, we call ourselves children of God. But if we call ourselves God, there's something completely wrong with
Like
that.
we burned at the stake for that.
Exactly.
That have been in other
There's this
lives.
separation, yet we're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be one with God, but yet we're supposed to separate ourselves from God because we are man or mere man. And yet we constantly read that kingdom of God is within you, that your body is the temple, and so forth. And yet, oh, that's because we have this technological interpretation that, oh, that's because when we accept Jesus Christ, that Jesus lives within us, right? But Jesus is saying, no, you are me and I am you. And so this whole separation creates this weird paradox, of contradiction, really. um but yeah, so in that regard, narratives is something that we definitely discover as part of our shadow. And by simply choosing to embrace a new narrative for ourselves, the change can be instantaneous. And it doesn't have to be about improving or, like I said earlier, righting wrongs. It's really on a higher level. It's more about, okay, lack and scarcity in that narrative of vows of poverty served its purpose for me, and I'm done with that. I don't need to do this anymore. And so we switch and undo that programming. But oftentimes we don't recognize that because it comes from a source that we are taught to embrace, whether it's God, religion, parents, teachers, and so forth. Work hard, study and go to good college, get a good job, get married and have kids. All of these narratives somehow was planted in us as some kind of formula to happiness. And so everybody blindly followed and submitted themselves to this program. And then they arrived to a certain point going, I'm not happy. What's going on here? I did everything I was supposed to do.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes it really takes getting everything that you wanted. I thought I wanted the lofty job with a cool company and the title and, moving with a certain crowd and then I got it and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, this sucks. Everyone's so fake. Like, I don't even like these people. What's a title? Who cares? Like, none of this matters. And I never would have had that clarity had I not actually achieved it.
There you
So
go.
it's like, fine, go do everything you want to do,
Mm.
but just check in with yourself to see, is it still what I want?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Yeah. I mean, on a side note, when you were talking about Jesus being inside of us and, you know, I am you and all of
Mm-hmm.
that come together.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what that song is about?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think so. But I mean, it definitely, they always wrote songs that can be interpreted in so many different
Mm-hmm.
ways. So they would, John Lennon, he always said, it's whatever you make it to be. He really, true artist never tells you what it's supposed to be and what you're supposed to feel,
They let you write your own narrative.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because everybody can, you know, extract whatever it is that suits them to that extent. So yeah, there to some people it's a very inspirational song, and to some people it's really not much other than her great rocking songs. So it's just that's the beauty of art, right? Because it's the beauties in the eyes of the beholder, and they let that be, and that's where I think that the true artistry comes from. If the artist is telling you what this is about and what you're supposed to feel from it, then there's a little different approach, I would say. I would prefer for us to be left to our own vices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so that in essence, religion is really in essence a manifestation of someone's interpretation and its agenda and intent, and then it evolved from there. And so we must always remember that it is still a man made institution in that regard, as marriage is really in the essence as well. You know, I'm, as I'm an ordained minister, and I get to experience officiating for people's weddings and so forth, and it really, helped me to uh, see and understand what is at the essence of marriage. Why is it that we strive for it? And why? Where did le- this whole process of legally binding to one another till death do you part come from? Because that's not spiritual. It's not even natural, let alone, right? To to expect for you and I to commit to something forever because we made this vow to do so. That is absolutely unnatural. And so, but yet, again, it is a narrative that's been embraced for years, and thus creating a sense of failure when that bond is comes to an end for whatever reason. And so that again, it's that kind of forced and unnatural narrative that in the end seems to be the thing that begins to create this discord, and those are the things that are deep underneath in our subconscious, in the shadow of ourselves.
Yeah. Good.
Now, that's not, of course, to take away from any joy and the aspect of celebration of marriage. Of course, I always say that marriage is about the celebration of union,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a season in our life, and sometimes that season lasts a whole lifetime. But that is not the rule to the beauty and the essence of marriage.
I also think approaching it with, sort of daily check in, maybe not daily, but the seasons that you speak of.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's so many couples who've been together for so long and they just kind of take it for granted,
Mm-hmm.
and then the romance is gone and the spontaneity because it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, we're already married. Why do
Mm-hmm.
we need to do anything else? Like we're locked in for the rest of our lives,
Yeah.
but like, where's the joy? Where's the person you fell in love with?
Mm-hmm.
And just approaching it with like no pressure, whatever it is, even like a job, I mean, back in the day, jobs were things that you would get and then
Mm-hmm.
you'd stay there until you retired,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now it's like, I've never had a job like that. I've had so many different careers in my life, and I can't imagine sticking with any of them longer than I did because seasons, I got the lesson that I needed, and whether it's marriage or a job or an experience or even a hairstyle,
Mm-hmm.
whatever works for you in that moment doesn't necessarily have to work the whole time,
Right.
but checking in with yourself and taking stock, and whether it's those experiences I just spoke of or even the narratives, to circle back,
Mm-hmm.
does this narrative still serve me? And if
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't, then all right, this season's over.
Yeah.
Move on to the next.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. We are sentient beings. We come together like, sort of the climate, merging at a particular point to serve each other. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
that merging takes something like a marital bond to be that close to one another, to go deep into to each other's shadows as well, and create that friction as iron sharpens another, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. So yeah, every bond is a vehicle of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Friendship. It has a, we are the one that created these labels, right? And yes, it's true. There are different forms of love in that regard. But again, whether it's biological, there's no rule. It's a vehicle that creates a certain dynamic that is meant to to stimulate and to trigger certain things within each other. And that's really what it is. Just because you're blood related, or just because you're family, doesn't mean that there's a rule that you're supposed to
Mm-hmm.
be something. But we create all of those things. Well, you're my mom, you should be like this for me. You're my father, you should have been like this for me.
Mm-hmm.
No, not really, because who defined that? No, just because we are the contributor to the sperm, or uh, we are the biological father, doesn't mean that it comes with a set definition, a template that applies to all. And so, like I said, when we begin to own and regain our sense of sovereignty, then we begin to see that, oh, why did I choose this particular dynamic to be born into? Why did I choose my father to be my father? And so forth. Then everything becomes a beautiful introspective process, and both light and shade
There's
becomes
power in
beautiful.
that too.
Absolutely.
You're taking something that you previously believed happened to you,
Mm-hmm.
and now you're like, this happened for me
Mm-hmm.
to learn from. And just
Yeah.
that subtle shift in perspective, like,
Mm-hmm.
just it changes volumes, and just your own sort of autonomy and experience, and realizing that you're driving your own, you're steering your own ship, like destiny, right?
Yeah.
You're in control, you're in charge.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, just pondering the just what's behind it.
Yeah.
It's not just an experience that's you're having to witness.
Yeah.
It's there for a reason. So what's the reason?
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you, Mehreen. That was always a wonderful. Yeah, I love the way you always enhance and bring such a great vocabulary. You
Oh,
add so much
thank
vocabulary to the topic, and so I
you.
really
Nice way of saying
appreciate
I
this.
talk a lot, huh?
No, 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 absolutely.
Just kidding.
No, but this is definitely what needed to happen. I think this. I really we as co-hosts to one another, we invite our listeners to also join in on this, conversation. That when we bring things out in the open, and when we have removed the stigma, we remove any preconceived ideas and judgments or criticism about any topic, that we are able to really create a state of detachment. I always say attachment is connection with conditional love, and detachment is connection with unconditional love. And I think that this is a place where we detach from every topic that we talk about, and that there is no judgment. There is no, because in the end, what we're aiming to do here is to really help and encourage one another to lift any limiting beliefs that creates that ceiling within us, infinite possibilities, something that we bestow upon our. And so, this kind of topic is something that we definitely like to continue to discuss and go in deep with. So thank you all for listening to our podcast, and we look forward to having you join us in our next episode. We have not yet decided on what we're going to talk about, and that's the fun of it, I think.
Hmm.
But we are definitely looking forward to going deep with you. Mehreen, thank you for joining me today on
Thank
our
you.
podcast. And until next time, love and light to all of you. Namaste from the heart.